Welcome back. See guys, I couldn't resist. We are going to be now reading chapter 4 of If Life is a Game, These Are the Rules. You can get a copy of this book down below. I encourage you to get a physical copy, as well as a physical copy of my book, How to Get It, A Brief Guide to Getting in Tune with Your Inner Self. Okay? Now, let's jump into lesson 4. A lesson is repeated until learned. Excuse me. Lessons will be repeated to you in various forms until you have learned them. When you have learned them, then you can go on to the next level. Guys, I'm experiencing this right now. Every time I try to step out, I try to get my own place, something always happens and then I have to leave the place. So the lesson I think for me is that the Son of Man have nowhere to rest his head, and that's okay too. You can't control anything in this world. Every time I try to control a property or try to do something of that nature in my own name, it becomes a trap. Every lease becomes a sentence. Every apartment or every place becomes a cage to a bird like me. So, have you ever noticed that lessons tend to repeat themselves? Does it seem as if you married or dated the same person several times in different bodies with different names? Have you run into the same type of boss over and over again? Do you find yourself having the same problem with many different coworkers? Several years ago, Bill Murray stated in the movie Groundhog Day, in which he woke up in the same day over and over again until he learned all the lessons he needed to in that one day. The same events kept repeating themselves until he finally got it, what it was that he was supposed to do in each one. Does this strike a funny or familiar chord with you? Lessons will be repeated until learned. When I taught high school, I was always told by the students, if you don't deal with your authority figures at home, then you will have the opportunity to deal with them out in the world. You will continuously draw into your life people who need to enforce authority, and you will struggle with them until you learn the lesson of obedience. Teenagers often perceive their parents as overly strict. At the age of 14, one of my former students went away to boarding school. Much to her surprise, she found the teachers and the staff with the same rules that her mother had laid down for her at the house that I had at the school. She finally understood. In couples counseling, it's often noticed that people who divorce and remarry nearly always marry the same type of person they just left. Similarly, a friend of mine named Cassidy, who was a compulsive perfectionist, had a knack for attracting inappropriate men. It was no coincidence that Cassidy, to whom mismatched socks were a horror and a torn shirt a federal offense, repeatedly drew men into her life who liked to dress like slobs. She was a stickler for manners, yet her most recent boyfriend held a spoon like Fred Flintstone wields a drumstick. Only recently did Cassidy begin to acknowledge that perhaps these men were appearing in her life as teachers and opportunities to work on her own perfectionist issues. You will continuously attract the same lessons into your life. You will also draw to you teachers to teach you that lesson until you get it right. And this just reminds me of the quote that goes something similar to the line of, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, and when the student is really ready, the teacher will disappear. The only way you can free yourself from difficult patterns and issues you tend to repeat is by shifting your perspective so that you can recognize the patterns and learn the lessons that they offer. You may try to avoid the situations, but they will eventually catch up with you. To face these challenges means that you need to accept the fact that something within you keeps drawing you to the same kind of person or issue, a painful thought, that situation or relationship may be. In the words of Carl Jung, there is no coming of consciousness without pain. And come to consciousness, you must, if you are ever to stop repeating the same lesson and be able to move on to new ones. The challenge of Rule 4 is to identify and release the patterns that you're repeating. As any good facilitator or therapist will tell you, this is no easy task, since it means you have to change, and change is not always easy. Staying just as you are may not help you advance spiritually, but it certainly is comfortable in its familiarity. You grooved your patterns a long time ago as a way of protecting yourself. Moving into unfamiliar new behavior can be uncomfortable, not to mention at times frightening. Very frightening at times, I find. Especially when you see, Especially when you don't recognize the fact that these patterns are repeating themselves, it can be very frightening to think that like you have to go through this again. When you feel, to me at least, when it felt as though like I just went through this, I just got out of it, I thought I learned what I needed to learn, but perhaps not, because you're still on the same path and you're still having to learn the lesson before you can move on to the next one. Rising to the challenge of identifying and releasing your patterns forces you to admit that the way you have been doing things isn't working. You have to recognize the way that you're doing things is not working previously. And that's the thing that I noticed in my life, especially when dealing with money and debt and that cycle. I get out of debt, then something will happen, then I'll go back into debt, I'll get out of it, I'll come back in again. And my first inclination was always to get another job, But then I realized that you can't sell your time. You can't outwork the clock, you can't outwork the clock. And it doesn't make sense for me to like pour all this information or like learn all this information and then as soon as something happens to immediately pivot and go back to my old life. So only when I changed my thinking and changed my perspective about how it is that I could navigate these situations did things start to change for me, and different ideas started to come into my mind that allowed me to move and navigate around the situation in a different way. So interesting to see. So I'm always learning lessons, and I'm always learning the same lesson until I get it right. So raising to the challenge of identifying and releasing your patterns forces you to admit that the way you have been doing things isn't working. The good news is that by identifying and releasing the patterns, you actually learn how to change. Yeah, you learn how to change. In my seminars, I teach that there are 6 basic steps to executing any change in your life. And they are: awareness, becoming conscious of the pattern or issue. 2, acknowledgement, admitting that you need to release the pattern. 3 is choice, actively selecting and releasing the pattern. 4, strategy, creating a realistic plan. 5, commitment, taking action, aided by external accountability. And 6, celebration, rewarding yourself for succeeding. No lasting change can be made, nor any pattern release permanently without going through each of these steps. In order to facilitate your process or change, you will need to learn the lessons of awareness, willingness, casualty, and patience. Once you master these, you will most likely find the challenge of identifying and releasing your patterns far less intimidating. Awareness. Only the day dawns to which we are awake. Henry Thoreau. Awareness is the process of becoming fully conscious. Awareness can trickle into the corners of your mind slowly as you clean out the cobwebs, or it can dawn suddenly the moment you become cognizant of your patterns and begin to see yourself objectively. However, it is like a light bulb being switched on that illuminates the dark pockets of your unconscious mind. It is the first step to facilitating any change you wish to make in yourself. Cultivating awareness is a lifelong process. Every moment presents you with the opportunity to remain awake to the slip into unconscious behavior. We can walk through life on autopilot. It's very easy to walk through life on autopilot, and then before you know it, you're 65 years old, and you look back at your life and you think to yourself, what did you even do? What choices did you make for yourself? You literally just went through life the way that they told you to, and never stopped to think once for yourself. The key to learning awareness lies in tracking the root of your behaviors, so you can identify the beliefs that cause you to repeat the same process patterns. Once you identify the patterns, you can then work on releasing them through willingness. The opportunity to learn the lesson of awareness is presented each time you feel a sense of discontent to your life. With every desire for a shift in your path or vision or something different comes a chance to look within and ask yourself, what is the truth of what I want? What change do I want to make? The answers that arise to these questions will provide you with the awareness you need to move forward in your process or change. There are countless ways to awaken. Paying attention to your feelings is the easiest way to get in touch with your inner Machinations? Two new words. This is one new word. Every time I read a chapter, I learn a new word. I love it. This word is Machinations. Machinations. Inner machinations. Interesting. Feelings are the light of the dashboard of life. When one is illuminated, you can be sure it is a signal of some internal issue that needs to be addressed. Simply noticing your behavior can bring you awareness. When you observe your actions as an objective spectator, you remove the filter of self-judgment and allow yourself to see the patterns that you are repeating. Right. As you watch yourself in a variety of situations and notice similar actions and reactions, you bring to light the common thread attached to the necessary lessons. Tools like meditation, journal writing, personal coaching, therapy, and help many learn awareness. For others, simply posting meaningful reminders in the bathroom mirror works. For me, surrounding myself with others who are on their own path to live a conscious life is the best way for me to stay awake. Since lessons are repeated until they're learned, and since you cannot learn lessons until you become aware of them, it makes sense that you need to cultivate awareness if you are to ever progress from where you are right now on your path. Ask yourself, what patterns are you repeating? You might be surprised to see how evident they were all along. So true. When you stop and really just analyze your life. Stop and look at your life and think about where you were, think about something that you've overcome, and then think about where you are now and see if that is a mirror of where you were previously. I see it in my life, so I'm able to make that connection and that distinction to think that okay, this was one thing. I came out of it, I got out of this low, I got high, and then I came back down again, and then now I'm climbing back up the ladder again. So, interesting. Acknowledgement. Acknowledgement is key. Okay, guys and girls? Willingness. Life doesn't require that we be the best, only that we try our best. That hard. That's deep. H. Jackson Brown Jr. I'll drink to that. The real secret to being able to change is the willingness to do so. If you are to make any progress at all in excavating yourself from the cycles that entrap you, you must first identify the patterns that keep you stuck. Then you can begin to release these old patterns. If you truly want to change, you will choose to do it and make a commitment to the process of it. However, if you rely on the thought that you should change, you will make the decision to do so. And then you will feel the pinch of sacrifice. Let's read that one again. However, if you rely on the thought that you should change, you will make the decision to do so, and then you will feel the pinch of sacrifice. Interesting. Following the current trend and advice of friends or the wishes of family members results in decisions. Following your inner compass results in choice. Be in charge of your own choices. Perhaps the change you wish to make is to stop smoking. If you truly want to stop, then you choose to do so and you make a commitment to quitting. However, if you just have a nagging feeling that you should quit, you might then decide to do so and thus end up feeling like you are making a sacrifice by quitting. So the outcome is the same, but the process to get there is different, and that will determine how successful you will be. Or perhaps you think that you need to begin to exercise more. If you truly want to do this because you want to become healthier or more fit, then you will viscerally make the choice to do so and will have a much easier time making the commitment to your new routine. However, if you think that you should exercise to look or feel better, you will most likely decide to do something half-heartedly and thus feel like you're making a sacrifice each time you're trying to exercise. Remember, write this down. Wants leads to choice, which leads to commitment. Should leads to decisions, which lead to sacrifice. I got you. I know you're asking, Cody, can you read it again? I got you. Remember, want leads to choice, which leads to commitment. Should leads to decisions, which leads to sacrifice. deep. Whenever I think of the lessons of willingness, I think of a woman named Karen who came to one of my time management workshops. Karen was an incredibly busy person who ran around all the time trying to catch up on all the things that she had to do. Between her errands, her phone calls, her hectic job, social obligations, Karen was always on the run and never on time for anything. Karen's family began to get angry that she rarely had time for them, and that when she did make time, she would show up nearly an hour late. Her boss admonished her repeatedly for arriving late to work. Her friends felt ignored and annoyed that she could not ever send a birthday card on time. The pressure on Karen to change her ways was enormous, so she decided to work on managing her time better. Karen did improve her habits for about a week. She tried to organize her life better so that everybody in her family would be happy, but she overlooked one essential fact. She really did not want to change. She was not willing to give up the adrenaline rush she got from running around all the time. She enjoyed feeling needed in many different places at once. Interesting. Giving that up felt like a sacrifice to her. Karen's efforts to change fell short, and she ultimately reverted back to her old patterns. By the time Karen came to the workshop, several months after her aborted attempt to change, she was physically exhausted and emotionally drained. She herself could no longer tolerate living the way that she had been living. Karen admitted that she needed to change, not for anybody else's sake, but for her own sanity. Karen was willing to change and thus chose to do so. She no longer wanted to miss the first hour of every family dinner or have to sneak into the back door of her office building in the morning. It was her willingness that allowed her to commit to a more manageable schedule and eventually get her life under control. So the next time you're struggling to make a change in your life, ask yourself, how willing am I really to make this change? If you're not succeeding, there's a good chance that you may be relying on your belief that you should change, rather than on your intrinsic desire to do so. Interesting. Causality. To every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. Sir Isaac Newton. Causality is the acknowledgement that you are the source of your manifestations. In other words, everything that you attract into your life is coming to you because of something you are projecting out into the world, and you are therefore responsible for drawing to you all of the circumstances. It's difficult to give up the idea that circumstances just happen to you as opposed to because of you or your behavior. By remaining an innocent victim of fate, you do not have to acknowledge that you are in any way responsible for what befalls you, and you can continue to hide deep within the vortex of your patterns. Think back to my friend, the perfectionist, who consistently attracted sloppy men into her life. As she and I discussed her partner, she began to consider the possibility that she was projecting something out into the world that was attracting these men. Perhaps it was that she was so well put together and groomed that they gravitated towards her so that she could reinforce their identity as slobs by comparison. Or perhaps it was simply an issue of chemistry. Regardless of what energy it was that drew the men into her life, she ultimately needed to own up to the fact that she was the one causing her circumstances. Or let's look at Andrew, a chef who had gotten fired from 4 different restaurants for inappropriate behavior. In each case, he claimed that the management of the restaurant was to blame. He either said that they had victimized him, he said he had been victimized by the management, set up by his boss, and not told exactly what it was that he was supposed to do. What Andrew needed to look at, however, was the behavior that he was repeating over and over that was causing the pattern to perpetuate. That is not to say that each firing was entirely his fault. It just seems highly unlikely that 4 different restaurants could have the same issue with him without there being some truth to it. Andrew needed to learn that he played a role in creating his circumstances. Then and only then could he begin to see his patterns and work to release them. Patience. Be patient. You'll know when it's time for you to wake up and to move forward. Ram Dass. Patience is the display of tolerance while awaiting an outcome. You are presented with the lesson of patience the moment you try to create a change within yourself. You expect immediate results and are often disappointed when your first few attempts to follow through fall short. When people try to lose weight, cheat on their diets, they get very frustrated with themselves for not being able to stay with their new eating regimen and berate themselves for not changing their patterns. As you already know, change is rarely easy, and you need to exercise gentleness and patience with yourself as you work your way through the process. Growth can be slow, painstaking process, and patience will provide you with the stamina you need to become a person you want to be. If you absolutely hate getting stuck in traffic, chances are you need a little work in the area of patience. And chances are you will probably get stuck in more traffic jams than somebody who has no issues with patience. And not simply because the universe has a sense of humor, you will just notice the traffic more than somebody who has no issues with it. Remember, a lesson will be repeated until learned. It just takes a little patience. That's funny. This concludes the reading of Chapter 4 of If Life is a Game, These Are the Rules. Now guys, as I always say, I encourage you to get a physical copy of all the books here we read so that you're able to hold the knowledge, touch it, and feel these things for yourself. You can find a copy of this book in the Amazon store down below. It helps support the channel and it helps this thing grow. So I encourage you to get a copy of this book today, and I encourage you to get a copy of my first book, How to Get It, a brief guide to getting in tune with your inner self. This one is available now on Amazon and all around the world. It's also available on my site at digitalgo.space. So that one is really a brief guide to getting in tune with yourself, allowing you to gain the perspective that you need to figure out what it is, figure out what your it is, and then use that to change the world around you. And that, my friends, is it for today. I am your host and your friend, Cody. I'm excited to see you guys for the reading of Chapter 5 and beyond, and for the reading of all these books. As my library continues to grow, you will see these books. You will continue to see me reading all these books. My library will continue to grow. So guys, again, grab a copy of this book, If Life is a Game, These Are the Rules. Grab a copy of my book, How to Get It, a brief guide to getting in tune to your inner self. And if you want to chat with me, if you want to do exclusive coaching or consultations, find the links down below. I can be reached very easily at this time. So appreciate you guys, love you, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Appreciate you, love you lots. See you soon. Bye guys, peace.